Prayer Before Work by May Sarton. Great One, austere, by whose intent the distant star holds its course clear. Now make this spirit soar, give it that ease. Out of the absolute, abstracted grief, comfortless, mute, sound the clear note, pure, piercing as the flute. Give it precision. Austere, great one, by whose grace the inalterable song may still be wrested from the corrupt lung. Give it strict form. I have goosebumps.
Hi, I'm Corrin. This podcast is called The Ache, an ode to the existential ache of being human, that still small voice tugging inside every single one of us, prompting us to change, move, grow, become more of our authentic selves. This is conversations with people who dance with the ache.
But something that's been coming up for me a lot as a theme that I think could be interesting too is this balance of finding when to take something very seriously and when to be really playful. And that's something that I'm like thinking about a lot because it's so vital to be playful, but also knowing when to get fucking deadly serious about something and how it can be it can be unexpected, the things that you really need to take seriously and the things that you should be really playful with.
That's Lily Cowles. She's a very good friend of mine and my writing partner. She's also an incredible actor and storyteller. She's one of my favorite people in the world. She's very introspective. She works with a Jungian analyst. And by God, she's an incredible friend.
How do you make that distinction, especially for me as someone who has a little bit of a hard time with discernment? And I historically have been such a clown all my life. So I feel like for a lot of my life, I've actually taken things not seriously. But there's always been something very deep inside of me that takes things extremely seriously, which is probably where the clown almost comes from. It's an easy way to like diffuse that intensity. If you throw up your hands, you're like, it's all a fucking joke. But underlying that is this desire to have it be, that it is really serious, that the stakes are really high. My one life and the way that I perceive myself or the work that I'm creating. The things that people are taking seriously that I'm like, oh, you need to like loosen up the grip on that. The product, the finished product, how things come out, how something like lands, the perception of it, people's like, the way that people are perceiving me. I think a lot of effort is put into controlling things that we can't control. And then not enough effort can be put, in the areas that you actually do have control. I guess your relationship with yourself and the way that you're perceiving the world, the things that your own perception of things, that is something that I think actually should be taken really seriously. And just being conscious of it, that it's something that you can actually make decisions about.
One of my favorite stories that I think illustrates this point really well, Lily told me a long time ago, and it was about her relationship with a character that she was playing in a video game. I asked her if she could tell us the story, and she said yes. Here it is.
I love the story about you and that character and like the journey that you went on internally, as much as you can say,
right. Right.
But
I can say it all.
Okay.
I mean, Zendara of House Kelduth. I was given an audition for this video game, and the breakdown was Lucy Lawless, who was Xena Warrior Princess, meets Grace Jones. And I was like, but in a fantasy world. And I was like, oh my God, this character's gonna be so fucking hot. Like I was just picturing what they were gonna make me into, and it was gonna look so hot. And I did a great audition. Actually, I booked the thing because I decided randomly to give them a take where I've spoken a Russian accent. And the guy was like, well, you gave us a really random, unexpected thing. And that was what we were like, oh, wait a second. That's fun. It just caught their attention, I think. So I booked the job, and I was so excited because I was just thinking about how hot I was going to be in this game. Ego. Perception. I was like, oh, great. What's great about video games is like I don't have to look any certain way. My body can be like soft, and I don't have to actually get in shape, but they're going to make me look like Grace Jones Or like Xena Warrior Princess. Like, I'm going to be so fucking out there. Put me in a little bikini. I'm going to have abs and like a high, tight ass and lots of hair. These wide set eyes. I'm going to be so hot. I'm so excited. Like, it doesn't matter. And I can, eat Pop-Tarts beforehand. It doesn't matter. Like, I don't have to worry about what I'm actually going to look like on camera. The tyranny of being on camera, So I was like, this is great. I'm going to look so hot. Was my sad ego thought. And then I get to work the first day. They haven't told me this before literally I arrive on set. And they're like, we're so excited. We have some things to show you. We want you to look at what your characters are going to look like. And also, Lily, this is important for you because it's going to affect, your vocal style and your body mechanics. And I was like, yeah, because like I'm extremely lithe and nimble and like I'm shaped like a jaguar, but in a human form. Like, let's see it. And they're showing like everyone else their characters and they're all looking so fantasy hot. Like the lead actor, Darren Barnett, who's now blown up. He was blowing up during this game. It was so funny. But he, looks like he's got like cool anime hair and he looks hot. And then they like turn the page to my character and my heart sinks because in the lookbook is it's basically The Rock's body, Dwayne Johnson. It's The Rock's body with like my face superimposed onto his head. And I was like, oh my God, my blood turned to ice because it's my deepest fear and one of my greatest insecurities that I've always had is that I'm this hulking, enormous monster of a person.
Because of your height.
All of these things contributed. I grew up next to two women who were like so fine-boned and like little beautiful birds without even trying. They were just like delicate, beautifully proportioned. Now, not to say that I'm not beautifully proportioned or anything. I just kept growing. I just like kept getting taller and taller. My voice now is like less husky than it was when I was young. I had nodes on my vocal cords because I was constantly screaming. So I was like, I was like, hey, Mom. And for whatever reason, like, my hair also doesn't really grow. I have like frog hair. So I had like, little,
Frog hair.
it says the amount of hair on a frog, which is none. So as a little kid, I had this like big toad head with like no hair and this like husky voice. And I just like kept growing and I was taller than everyone. More than that, there was a psychological thing that was going on, which was that I was really repressed. There was a lot that I couldn't say. There was a lot that I wasn't allowed to express in the family dynamic. I was swallowing so much down, which inside of me turned into rage. And I would be the clown, relaxed, funny, easygoing, emollient, just like so nothing but grace until suddenly the pressure in the pressure cooker that I had like blocked up got so intense that it would explode and I would lose it and I would be like the Hulk. I would Hulk out. I would lose control and it was frightening. I'm like having the feeling in my body right now, like remembering it felt good, but it also felt so scary. And then after I was full of shame about it because it was like, what is this part of me? I'm like a monster. Yeah, that's where like the psychological aspect of it came along. And then on top of that, I was bigger. I was like, had a stronger body. I was like tall. I had this deep voice. So when it like flipped and that rage came out, it frightened me and it clearly frightened people around me. And that was reflected back. What's wrong with you? Like, that's so scary. Like, what is the matter with you? I have so much sympathy for myself now, understanding where that came from, because I'm like, what did you think was going to happen if you turned the heat all the way up and you sealed the lid? What did you think was going to happen? The water wasn't going to boil? Like, no, it was going to fucking blow the lid off. But back in those days, I didn't understand that, so I just had so much shame around that. Flash forward to me looking at this picture of Zendara of House Calduth. The embodiment, the physical representation of everything that I was afraid that people perceived me as. And they were like, great news! We've hired you for the next 2.5 years, which turned out to be like 4.5 years, almost 5 years working on this game. I was going to be playing the exact thing that I was so terrified. And it felt like someone had caught me hiding in a closet. Like they opened the door and they were like, I found you. It was like, how did you find this part of me? How did you know that? I'm like, no. They've like found me out. My secrets, I thought I kept it down. I thought all these years of me like popping my hip to the side and making myself smaller and lifting my voice and being like really nice and not letting that like monster come out of me, that I was like, I've been found out. Like they found me out. I couldn't hide it. But the funny thing was, I was there and they were looking at me. This was all happening in real time. And they're all looking at me like, aren't you so excited? Like, look at you. You're this strong, powerful woman. And I'm like trying to not cry. Like, I'm like, why didn't you make me hot like I wanted to be? I thought you were going to make me skinny with big boobs and hot. Like, what is this? They're like, so you're about 7.5 feet tall, probably 800 pounds of muscle. So that's just going to affect, where your voice is sitting and the way that you move. So when you walk, we need to feel that extra boom, 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 boom. And I'm like, no, don't make me do it. Like, please don't make me do it. It was too late, I was there. It was like, they were like, time to put on the motion capture suit. Let's get started. Which also looking back, I'm like, that's crazy that was the first time that I was given that information. Like, I'm like, okay, just Johnny on the spot. Let me like create my character like this. Okay.
You're so good at that.
It was fun. So I put on my suit and I started to do it. And I was like, at first so terrified because I was embarrassed because this was something that I had trained myself out of. It was like, don't ever let anyone see this part of yourself. And then suddenly it was like this muscle that was like aching to be used. Like the muscle was like, oh my God, please, like, let me fucking lift something. I'm so strong. And I was like, no. Can't let anyone know. But there I was, standing in front of this barbell being like, they were like, could you lift that? And I'm like, yes, I could. And like, at first I was a little shamed, I'm like, okay, like this. And they're like, oh yeah, like that. I'm like, oh, like that. So that's like, you like that? And they're like, oh yeah. Can you do it more? Can you make her bigger? Could you kind of like take off, she's just really sink into her being a fucking like the strongest, most capable, grounded, solid character. And it was something like started changing inside of me where I was like, wait a second. I walked out that door and I had a paycheck from playing the thing that I had been so scared to even touch all of my life. Like, what? Is that allowed? Like, even arriving in Hollywood, there was such a feeling of like, I gotta starve myself. I have to make myself small. I have to try to be skinny. I have to try to be non-threatening. Being threatening was such a dangerous thing for me. I realized how I tried to make myself so non-threatening for so long. And suddenly they were like, could you be a really fucking big problem for this guy? Could you threaten him and make him really terrified? Yeah, I guess I could try. Fuck yeah. It felt so good. And developing the character, it became this enormous healing process for me because it took something that was so negative for me, something that I had been like so ashamed of my whole life. And it started showing me how beautiful that thing was and how it didn't relate to any of the attributes that I thought I was supposed to be bringing to the table. Pretty, like accommodating, nice and easygoing, whatever. It was like, no, she was none of those things. She's not really sexy. She's sexy because she's capable, but that's different than leading with like, I'm sexy because I'm hot. She was powerful. And getting to explore that and being asked to like find it more deeper. Can you go more? Like, how powerful can you possibly be? Oh my God, that was one of the greatest gifts I've ever been given. as an actor, yes, that was amazing to be able to live in that space. As a human being, to see, wait a second, like this thing I've been so terrified and hiding all this time, it's been like the key to my success. It's been, if I had embraced that part, what would I have been capable of doing so much earlier? I love that character, and she was funny. And then when I was given just a little permission, and then it was like I just fucking like grew into it, playing in her, Zendara.
And then what, like, tell about like what happened when you went to the premiere, and then what you found out about the testing.
Oh my God, that's right. It started like little whispers. In the booth I'd come in, or I would come in for a session, and they'd be like, you know, people love Zendara. And I was like, they do? Yeah, no, people, the game developers are really excited about Zendara. I'm like, that's great. Okay, so now they're booking me more. Suddenly I'm getting like more work is coming in than I thought. I come in for a session, they're like, by the way, we have something exciting to tell you. Zendara's going to become the queen in the end. And I'm like, what? They're like, yeah, well, you know, there's this whole thing. We've decided, we've changed it. So we're going to overthrow, and then your character becomes like, ascends to the throne in the end and becomes the leader. And I'm like, oh, that wasn't supposed to happen in the original storyline. And I was like, oh my God, I'm watching in real time as the character that I'm creating is touching people and making them want to bring her out more and more. Wow, that was so exciting. And then I would see as you go along a game, it's so many years until like 3 years in or whatever. They're like, yeah, it's just testing so well. People love this character. They're really responding. I'm like, makes me so happy to hear that, because she's been having such a huge impact in my life. So I'm so happy that it's touching people. I get to the premiere. There's years later, because of COVID shut everything down for so long. But eventually there was a premiere after party to celebrate the release of the game. And when I went in, I got to meet all of the developers, all the people who'd worked on it, the designers, and everyone who'd done, a video game takes hundreds and hundreds of people working on it. And I got to meet everyone who was working on it in so many capacities. And I was thrilled to find out how many people just loved Zendara. And she was just like a game favorite. And I truly think it was just, I was touching on something that was so real. And I think that it must have translated. I mean, what is it that you say? That no tears on the...
No tears in the writer, no tears in the reader.
Well, there was something going on that was really legit. It was real for me, whatever was happening in those video game sessions and those like voiceover booth sessions. I was tapping into something that was aching for a voice. And I was finally given a microphone. And I think people responded to it just because they could feel it. I'm sure they could just feel that. It was really real, whatever was happening. Very healing experience.
Carl Jung said, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will rule your life and you will call it fate. The story that Lily told, I think, is such an amazing illustration of this. Taking the unconscious rage, the snake inside of her, and giving it space. Giving it a safe space to come out and play and show its fangs and show all of itself, so that it doesn't get so bottled up and explode in a way that's unhealthy.
And by the way, that pressure cooker, I've found I don't experience rage the way that I used to. And I don't think it was just Zendara. I think it was growing up and gaining other tools. But to be sure, the channeling of power, and I don't mean power over someone else, I mean your own personal energy, that when you squash it and you shove it down, of course it's gonna come out some way. And being able to exercise that energy of like real capability and power, to be able to let it out on a regular basis in a way that's healthy, that helps me so much. It doesn't like, get all caught up inside of me and then explode. It's like I just let it out a little bit and a little bit.
What's funny too is like a thing that I don't think we've ever
talked about this in the way that, like, maybe you've said this to me in this way before, but I've never heard you say what you said just now about, I'm gonna cry. Just about the, like, pressure cooker of the anger within you, like, as a young girl. And, like, I guess you have kind of shared that, but I guess I didn't realize how similar we were as children, because I think we often focus on, like, the differences
Right.
between us, you know, because we're like, oh, we have all these complementary skills and gifts that we get to bring to the table when we're working together. And so I think a lot of our focus goes there. But to see where we're both at in our journeys with embracing our rage as a positive tool,
Right.
and not to, like, harm ourselves or others, but to be an indicator of something that needs to change or something that we need to, like, act on or whatever, is so beautiful. But, you know, that was my experience as a child. And your exact wound of saying, like, oh, I'm afraid that I'm this, like, big tornado of a monster, like, which I know I've heard you say, but I've heard you say it in the context more of, like, your mercurialness, or, like, how you'll, like, shift and move so fluidly. And for me, that's my core wound, is, like, exactly what you said, where you're like this pressure cooker that would explode and terrify everyone. And, like, that was my experience as a child.
Right.
And I was very scary to everyone around me.
Right.
And my directness and my anger was terrifying to everyone, including me. And I
Right.
would go through the same cycle of, like, the shame afterwards. And then, yeah, it's the thing that comes up for me anytime I'm triggered, which I know you've witnessed with me too, which is this thing of just being like, oh, am I a bad person? It presents differently for me. But I think being a young child and having the power to scare adults
Right.
is too much power to be giving a young child. But when you see all these adults around you being like, you're scary, and then
Right.
as a child you're like, oh God, I must be a real monster if these, like, full-grown adults are scared of me.
Right.
So that was my experience. So I don't know, hearing you say that, I had never heard it put so concisely and, like, in that way, to where I was just like, oh shit, I guess we've never talked about the fact that we have had this is exactly the same,
Right.
like, experience.
Right.
Mine was, I was raised extremely religious, so it was a different type of suppression.
Right.
My family was totally comfortable talking about things with one another,
Right.
but there was this don't be going outside the box of the religion.
Right.
And these are the things that are allowed, and these are the things that are not allowed, and
Right.
you shouldn't be being interested in sex or like anything. So my repression was from that.
Right. How much of it is like, don't threaten the system?
Yeah.
There's a system here and you cannot threaten it. And then what are you supposed to do with the parts of yourself that are like, but I'm experiencing these things that are transgressive. Where do I put them? And, you know, being told that you're such a threat and you're so dangerous, and you have this feeling like, oh my God. On one hand, it's exciting. It almost makes it, you're like, wait a second, what do you mean I have power to make adults scared? What, are you scared of me, little bitch? I mean, like, on one hand, you know, I think I had this feeling that I was like, damn, I'm sitting on a dragon. But everyone's scared of it and telling me that it's such a bad thing. So it's easier for me to, and like, how much of the shame was almost performative, you know? Or, you know, to acknowledge, okay, right, I've done too much, and now I'm gonna act the part of being, you know, really sorry for what I've done, and I'm gonna make myself small, and I'm gonna do this thing. But I think always inside of me, my, like, cobra kundalini energy snake was like, fuck that though, because I still stand by what I'm feeling.
Yeah.
I didn't ever, you know, it was this weird trick where it's trying to make you doubt yourself. It's trying to make you doubt what your own power and your own wisdom is trying to tell you. I think it is that suppression that becomes the problem.
Last summer, Lily and I moved into her family home, Dayspring, which she renovated and now lives in full time. When we were there together, we were writing a script, and it sort of came to us rather than us conjuring it. It felt like we were pulling at the threads of the universe or something, and it was pulling at us too. And the house
the house has sort of a magic to it, and Lily's connection with the house is very deep and very profound, and I think another great example of shadow integration.
Again, I think about the force in me that drives me unconsciously, which now maybe I'm becoming more conscious of it, my psyche pushing me in places that, at one point maybe I would have called it fate, but now I'm more conscious of it, and I'm like, oh, this is my psyche is asking me to be making this kind of move now. It's a series of events that all conspire that got me out to Connecticut, but I think on some level that snake inside of me was like, I gotta get the fuck out of Los Angeles. I had been working in New Mexico for 4 years. A little backstory on my house is that this is a family generational home built in 1787. I grew up there. My father grew up there. It's in rural woods of Connecticut. I love it, but it is also the site of all of my childhood trauma. And there's darkness in the house that exists beyond my own childhood trauma. 1787, there's energy in that house. It just collected a lot. So it's just dense energetically. And after my father passed away, no one could really touch the house. And I started opening it up during COVID out of necessity, because I was like, where am I going to go? Well, there's this house in the woods. That seems like a pretty good spot to stay during COVID. And I found the house in terrible disrepair. It was heartbreaking. I have a really complicated relationship with that house. I have dreams of that house where it's trying to break my rib cage open, usually through my father. I'm in the house. My father is embracing me. The embrace becomes more and more aggressive, and his fingers are trying to pop through my ribs, are grabbing my ribs and finding little spaces between my ribs and trying to break open my rib cage. I knew that to try to heal the house was also to heal my own body and my own psyche. That if I could, that it was a stand-in, that these things were all the same, like accordioning. I think about this. I have this image in my head. I don't know why, but a cutout of a chain of paper dolls, and you cut out the little image of the girl, and you unfold it, and it's 10 little girls all holding hands in this paper chain. And I think of taking a hole punch and punching through the stack, and then you unfold all of them, and they've all got that hole in them. And I experience this it's this accordioning of a similar experience that's just in each of these iterations of this body. Well, healing Dayspring felt like if I could get in there on some level, I felt like that would help me in my own healing. So going back into that site was very intense because there was just so much to wade through. But once I started, it was such an alchemical process. It was truly there were moments where I thought it was going to, I was drowning. I was I hate this. Why did I do this? Why am I doing, I hate this. I took out a big loan. It was so overwhelming. I felt so alone in it, and I just hated it. And then slowly but surely it started to change, and the energy started changing. And to the point where now I'll sleep alone at Dayspring, and I have this love for it. It feels like it's this new beautiful place I brought back to life. I resurrected it. I mean, it's almost uncanny. My uncle died. He also had grown up there. He died right as I was arriving back at Dayspring to bring the house back to life, right before Easter. He died on Good Friday. He was a very religious man, jumped to Jesus with Jesus. And on Easter Sunday, we brought the house back up to life. I had this formal ritual that I brought the house back and then moved in there. Corrin, I will say, I don't know if I would have moved back in if you hadn't been coming with me. And the fact that we moved into that house and we started creating in that house, it became a place that was nourishing, and it became a place that was fertile suddenly. It was no longer a place of sadness and loss and grief and absence and sickness. It was suddenly a place where things were growing. Whoa.
That's the cycle of the earth. If you think about it, something dies, it becomes calm compost, it disintegrates, and then it becomes nourishment for growth, for new life.
When I think about the name of that house, Dayspring, it's a reference to the risen Christ, the resurrection of the dead. Spring coming back.
If you halt the death process too, I think about this all the time, I think we talk about, you and I are pretty good at letting go of things.
Let it die.
And letting them die, although your dream last night. But we are pretty good at letting things die. I think with our writing process, it's something that we're maybe too good at sometimes. We cut things and forget about them, and we don't even know. Killing your darlings is really not a thing for us, because we've forgotten that was even a thing. Once we're on to the next draft, we've cut all these scenes and we're like, wait, we had that? Oh God.
I do that in my relationships too.
Oh. Hey, what did we say earlier? If you don't get in and get out when the time is right to get out, you can't get on to the next thing.
You just gotta call it sometimes.
Yeah, you gotta call it. And I think you and I are fairly good. I don't think we're rash, but I think we're really good at allowing the thing to die that needs to die. And to me, hearing you talk about Dayspring, I'm like, yeah, you're letting the old house die away. You revamped it. You broke out did the whole remodel on the bedroom, all this shit. And of course, lovely Greta was helping you with all of that.
Bless you,
God
Greta.
bless her.
Yeah.
And then we all came in and were writing there. You and I were writing there, and Greta was writing there.
It was fecund. It just felt and the summer was popping all over, and it was fucking hot, and it was wet, and we were writing, and I was back in the swamp, and I was just oh God, my body was just oh, this is so much better. This is so much better. Can we stay here? Please don't make me go back to LA.
I didn't want to come back to LA. You remember, I was dying.
I mean, when I first went out, I think on some level I was thinking, well, this is I just gone through a breakup. So it was this is just where I'm landing. I have this beautiful big house. I just finished it. I had been planning on renting it out, but then it was well, fuck it. I'm just going to live here for this summer, and then I'll rent it out full time, but I'm just going to get back on my feet here. And I, even knowing that it felt temporary, I was still is this crazy? Can I move into the woods? That seems outlandish. You can't just move to the woods. What about your career? How are you expecting to gain any traction if you live out in the boonies? And then something really miraculous happened, which was that you and I wrote Corpus in 10 days. And I found that being out there, I was able to plug into a part of myself in the peace and in my nervous system being at ease and not being constantly distracted by the city around me, that I was able to connect to a part of myself that was extremely productive. And so what I accomplished out there in such a short time was the same as slogging away at Toothless in East LA, where I couldn't get anything written because constantly I'd be filling my schedule with I'm gonna go see this person to have a coffee. I'm gonna go do this thing that all felt like it was a use of my time, but it wasn't using my time in a way that was actually forwarding my creative career in the way that I wanted it to be.
So the opposite happened. You followed that call and faced that fear, and then now you've actually had more traction.
The ironic thing is that I took the leap of faith into obscurity and wound up coming out feeling like I was more valuable. Now I have 2 scripts to my name. We have, we've created all of this stuff, and it's gained traction. And that happened at the same time that I dropped off the face of the earth, and
quote unquote, but not at all, because
dropped into the heart of the earth.
Yes. It's interesting. I don't know. I think about this often because I've made many decisions in my life that are oh, this is the right way to do this, but it never really works that way.
Right.
Reach out to people, network, this and that. I never meet anyone that way. I've always just met people in a different way, and naturally things come together. Or anything that you're supposed to do.
Right.
Unless it feels authentic to you.
Right.
I don't think it's going to further anything. I think there's something to trusting your innate wisdom, trusting the snake, trusting the dragon, the cobra, whatever your thing in your side of yourself that's directing you. Because anything interesting never comes from just doing things the way that you're supposed to do them or the way they've always been done or whatever. Like everything is always iterating on itself and becoming a new version. And like the system that we live in now is going to be entirely different in 5 years.
Right.
So why force yourself to live a certain way and chase that? You know, I understand people have to make a living and stuff, but I don't know.
I'm thinking again about this idea of what you take seriously and what you don't take seriously, or what you allow yourself to play with. And it feels like, can we like flip it, the idea of taking your 5-year plan very seriously, and what are my goals and how am I going to get to my goals, and I'm going to set the goal here and then I'm going to engineer it backwards and I'm going to take that very seriously. And I'm like, I think it might be backwards. I think actually maybe you really need to be very playful about the forward facing part and dance and see like what is, you know what I'll take very seriously is what's directly here right now in this very moment. And what is my body saying about it? Am I comfortable in this moment right now? Do I feel at ease with this person? Am I feeling like safe? Does my body feel relaxed so that I can be creative, so that I can, and I take my creativity very seriously. I take, you know, my relationships very seriously, but like, I think we need to, or I have had much more success loosening my grip on the way that it's supposed to unfold. When I relieve myself of any, like, it should be unfolding like this, I need to have control of it happening this way. I don't know how it's going to happen. The best things in my life have all been things that came like sideswiped to me. Would never have seen it coming. And then I'm like, oh my God, thank God I was plastic enough in that moment to see that opportunity and go with it.
The more authentic you are, the more you lean into, this is the way that I'm going to make decisions by listening to my body and by listening to like what feels right to me.
Yeah.
And in tandem, recognizing that sometimes you are going to be in situations that are uncomfortable, but that are still right for you.
Right.
Because you want to like achieve certain, you know, things, or internally, you know, that's your edge and you know, like, oh, right. I'm uncomfortable because I have a judgment about this thing or whatever, and learning to discern the difference between like, this is a no from my body. And then this is my body being nervous because I'm facing an edge. Like,
that's a hard discernment to make.
Those ones are so hard.
Yep. So
hard. But I feel like that was pretty full circle. I don't know. I'm trying to think of anything else we should talk about. I mean, that felt pretty good. What do you think? This just feels like our normal conversations. This just feels like we just had a phone call. You want to know what Lily and I do when we write, dear friends listening to this? We have this conversation and then we write for 45 minutes.
45 minutes, we write 20 pages.
No, for real.
But like tending to the compost pile, you know, like you got to get that soil so rich. It all starts with the soil, you know. If the soil is rich, the things will grow. You don't even have to worry about them. Yeah. Tend to the soil. Focus on the soil. Make sure you've got some really nice fucking good soil.
Being your own psyche and like
all the stuff that died.
Yeah, the dead
that died and is
parts of your psyche. Yeah, it's dealing with them.
Fertile ground.
Yeah, fuck yeah, fertile ground. Here's to fertile ground. All right,
here's to fertile ground. What a dream.
Thank you for listening to The Ache. This podcast is produced by myself, Corrin Evans, and Alexis Murphy. All of the music that you hear here is original compositions by my good friend Peter Colombo. Any other pertinent information will be linked in the show notes, and thank you for listening.